Go ahead, Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. So in regards to motion M24-027, at the last board meeting that we had, I explicitly asked whether the renaming was a foregone conclusion or if we were just starting a conversation around the process. And I was told what we were doing was starting a conversation. However, from the delegation that we heard this evening, as well as press coverage and conversations that I've had within the community, there seems to be, for me, a contradiction in my understanding of the motion. I really want to understand what the intent was. I have to say, I don't think I'm the only one that's confused, because I recognize that there are other trustees who might have the same feelings as I do, and the public as well. So I'm wondering, and I would be asking to the director, so I will ask to the associate director, was the intention of the motion, M24-027, to rename the school because it had already been established that the term Iroquois was deemed derogatory, or was the intention to initiate the renaming process and elicit discussion from our community?
Thank you for the question. So the intent is, according to our AP and our guidelines, is to initiate the process of renaming.
So if I can have a follow-up on that. So what my concern with that is when I looked, and so I reviewed the naming and renaming process, and that's founded on the idea that conversations and research have already taken place. Being involved with this 4 years ago with Ryerson, 3 years ago, I remember before coming to the table talking about the motion, I remember doing research and looking into things and speaking to different people. And I'm just wondering, have we truly engaged in all of those conversations before we've gotten to where we are, which right now is saying we are going to create a committee, and they're going to go away and they're going to give us options of different names to choose from. They're not looking at, do we rename or not rename? They're just giving us choices. So I'm just wondering where the conversations fit in, because I think, again, looking at the policies, the conversations are supposed to happen first. And I'm just worried that we didn't fully engage in as many conversations as we could have.
So I'll say a couple of things. That the way the procedures read now is that the ad hoc committee is formed and the process begins, and conversations will take place there. Having said that, we can relook at our procedures in the future, but it's not. But the trustees always have the option, once that work has been done, to select one of those names or to decide not to make the change as well, according to the current procedures. But if it's the will of the trustees for future for us to look at those procedures and make some things more explicit, we certainly can do that.
Thank you. Moving on to the suspension expulsion report. Go ahead.
I have a question as well on that same motion.
Okay.
So through the chair, what's being said right now is contradictory. The trustees received a report saying that the term Iroquois was derogatory and that to initiate the renaming process. So coming in here, we're being told it's derogatory, start renaming. So that means consultation has happened, research has been done, create a committee, and solicit new names. So soliciting new names does not mean there's an option to keep Iroquois. That there's a huge disconnect there. So I need to be 100% clear. Is the school going to be renamed because it was deemed derogatory?
I can start, but I look to Superintendent Petco in terms of the preliminary discussions that were had that resulted in that report that came forward. So can I turn that over to you in terms of, yeah.
Through you, Chair Collard, a few things. When the naming AP was activated by the Board of Trustees by vote, that is when the process begins. And that process involves the consultation piece. I think there's some confusion here, if I may try to clarify. The confusion lay in the fact that prior to the AP being activated, the word consultation was used. The only thing that happens at that first step is that if an external party comes forward with a request for consideration to look at the name, the director sees that and says, is the rationale given? Because if you ask for a change in name or consideration of the name, you need to provide a rationale. And so the director looks at that in consultation with our Human Rights and Equity Advisor, with members of our Indigenous education team, and those who hold treaty, with our treaty partner as well. We consult. No one makes a decision. It's just a consultation. And if that rationale is seen as sound or enough to trigger the process begins. And that's why the AP was activated. But at no time did anyone say that the name must be changed. At no time did anyone say consultation will not happen. But there seems to be confusion around that, and maybe even the understanding of what consultation is. The activation of the AP is merely that the board will consider whether this is something that should move forward. And as Associate Director Salmini has said, the policy may have to be reviewed. So to ensure that the idea or the definition of consultation, one, is very clear, and that consultation that we're speaking of today happens prior to even the activation of the AP. And I see some nods. I hope that makes sense. And so if it doesn't, I'm sorry that, and we'll have to further, have those conversations, but I'm just stating what the intention of that initial activation of the AP was. It was never intended to be a full consultation with our Indigenous community, which was to happen once the trustees voted, please, let's explore whether this name needs to be changed or not. And as mentioned by Associate Director Salmini, this doesn't mean the name will have to change. The Board of Trustees has final decision on this. Multiple suggestions will be put forward, discussions will be had, consultation will continue. The ad hoc committee will have discussions. They will request whatever information, whether it's through linguists, historians, through members of the Indigenous community, and we'll have representation, Haudenosaunee in particular, on the ad hoc committee. And at the end, if the Board of Trustees decides that this name must remain or shall remain Iroquois Ridge, then it shall remain. But if the board decides that the options that were put forward are deemed and is chosen by the majority of trustees, then that will also move forward. Nothing has been decided in a definitive way.
I would like to add to that, to echo what Superintendent Petco just said. When it comes to the board, if the board does not vote in favor of a new name, then it's done. If the board decides we don't like the names you've brought forward, but we'd like you to bring forward different names, then that will happen. And if the board chooses one of the new names as the name of preference, then that will happen. But there is no foregone conclusion that this school will be renamed. There is a foregone conclusion that we are embarking on a process. And I hope that you find that helpful coming from the chair of the board, and that you will understand that we have no wish to cause anyone any harm. And we understand that people are hurt by this, and we have already started taking steps to look at our governance procedure and our policy to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. And we do deeply apologize for any harm that has been done. That was not what we were trying to do at all. And I hope that you will understand that we are learning. And sometimes we are learning too slowly for the people that are being impacted. And I understand that, and I apologize for that. But we are trying. We are trying. The next speaker on the list is Xinyi Zhang.
Sorry, I still have time. I wasn't finished.
Okay, go ahead.
So, there's been some clarification provided, but what was said on March 6th doesn't match up with what's being said today. Because on the March 6th report, and I won't say the written report because there was nothing in the written report, but verbally, we were told that our treaty partner was consulted. So at that point, we were told that consultation had happened, and now we're hearing we still need to go out and get more consultation, specifically the Haudenosaunee. So up on our wall, we have a multi-year strategic plan that has a commitment to Indigenous perspectives and awareness. We heard this evening that consultation is first step, not the last step. We have a report that is unclear and that we're still debating today as to what the report's intent was and what's its definition. So perhaps in a step towards clarification and a step towards some sort of reconciliation, I would like to ask, not Director Ennis because he's not here, but perhaps you, Associate Director, to rescind the report that was presented to the board on March 6th. Do the consultation first, come back with an informed report with enough details that does adhere to our multi-year plan, to our Indigenous education policy that specifically says that there has to be meaningful engagement, consultation, and consent. And our school naming and renaming governance procedure, which also states that if the current school name was appropriated from a culture community without appropriate consultation and recognition and consent. Everything we have in writing speaks to consultation, and none of that happened, except with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation on March 6th. So it looks to me that we consulted the wrong people. And so I would ask if you would consider rescinding the report and coming. Please don't say no. Let staff make a decision.
Staff can't make this decision.
They put the report in.
I'm sorry, Trustee Rocha. Trustees voted on this.
Motions can be rescinded.
Not by staff.
Yes, they can.
No,
and
they
I can
cannot.
send you proof of motions that have been rescinded during my terms.
Staff do not rescind motions. If you want to rescind the motion, you need to make a motion to do so.
I make a motion to rescind the motion from March 6th.
Okay, is there a seconder to this motion?
You have to motion to.
The gallery has to remain quiet because we are conducting a meeting here.
I don't know if I can suggest a happy medium.
You can once it's on the floor. I need a
Okay,
seconder.
then I'll second it to put it on the board.
Okay. And I'm going to clear the speakers list at this point because we now have a new thread. So you'll have to put your names back on afterwards. And Trustee Shuttleworth, if you want to put your name on, I can put you on as speaker. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Trustee Rocha, I know how passionate, this is your school. This is a school in your community, in your neighborhood. These are your, I don't want to call them your people, but they're your people. So, but I'm very cognizant that we have heard so much information this evening. We've heard from our delegate. We've heard information from Trustee Rocha. We've heard information from Superintendent Petco, and we've heard information from Associate Director Salmini. And I think it's important to clear up some misunderstandings that have happened throughout the evolution of this motion. I think, again, there has been non-clarity, that's a word, between the impetus behind this motion, whether it's to rename the school or to start the process. So I am going to suggest, and I don't know if this is proper. I think I might be out of turn, out of order, whatever, but I'm going to try it anyway. What I'm suggesting, instead of rescinding the motion and hopefully finding more support, is looking at putting a motion on the floor to amend the motion, to explicitly ensure that proper consultation is part of the process. So to add some words to it, to include that consultation explicitly, because that's where right now we're struggling and we're losing our direction, and we're finding that we're having voices from the community that don't feel heard. We're having conversations at the board that aren't going anywhere because nobody's listening to anybody. So I think it's really important to create some clarity for this motion and maybe add some words in terms of the exact same: be it resolved that the Humboldt District School Board consult with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, colonially termed the Six Nations and or Iroquois people, as well as our Indigenous community partners, to determine whether or not it is necessary to initiate the renaming process for the secondary school at 1123 Glen Ashton Drive, Oakville, in accordance with the board's naming and renaming schools policies and governance procedures. So I don't know if I can do that because there's a motion on the floor, but that's where I'm seeing to find somewhere down the middle that we can all come to an agreement.
So where that becomes problematic is that your motion that you're trying to make there is counter to a motion that's already in the books. So you can't have two motions that contradict one another.
You
at
can
the same
amend
time.
a motion previously made.
But that you're not amending a motion.
That's what I'm asking.
But it's not amending a motion if it's contrary. You can't make a motion that's contrary. It's not amending. No. So if we want to go back to the motion to rescind, I'm going to the speakers list. So please put yourself on the speakers list if you wish to speak.
Point of information.
Yes,
Who is our parliamentarian?
Carolina.
Then may I ask, so we had two claims made, one that a prior passed motion could be amended, and one that it could not be amended if it was contrary to the existing motion. I would ask a parliamentarian for advice on what is correct here.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So essentially the motion being proposed by Trustee Shuttleworth would essentially obtain the same effect as the motion being put forward by Trustee Rocha. So at this point, because there is a motion on and that is because of its contradictory nature. So let me just explain. So essentially, Trustee Rocha is asking to essentially undo or take back the motion that was originally passed on March 6th. By asking for an additional motion, Trustee Shuttleworth, to amend that motion, which essentially will force us to take back the decision that was already made. So it contradicts the original approved motion by saying that the decision to approve the process starting is essentially taken back. So it's in
Can I make a
essence,
No,
point
you
of
may
clarification?
sorry,
You're speaking through the chair.
Through the chair, can I ask a point of clarification?
You may.
So I'm just, when you, the difference, and again, what I see the difference, and again, you know better than I do. To rescind a motion means it can't come back unless you can't bring that same motion back. Correct? So if you rescind a motion, it's gone and it can't come back unless it looks completely different. Correct?
it need not look, sorry, through the chair, it need not look completely different. It can come back in an altered form.
Okay. All right.
Point of order.
Yes.
A person who voted, a person who wants to rescind has to be a person who voted in favor of the resolution. It can't be somebody who voted against it.
That's true. Thank you very much, Trustee Amos. So the motion to rescind has to come from someone who voted to approve that motion. Is there someone who approved that motion who would like to make the motion to rescind? It is one and the same.
So
now
I move to rescind.
And I need a seconder who also voted in favor of the first motion.
Point of order. I heard, I think I heard that Margot's motion was out of order because Tanya's motion was on the floor. Is that correct? Because Tanya's motion was being moved.
I can't move the motion because I voted against it.
Right?
So yes, at that point in time, when there is a motion on the floor, that Margot's suggestion was not formally on the floor. I was just explaining what would happen if that motion was on the floor. What was on the floor was the motion moved by Trustee Rocha and seconded by Trustee Shuttleworth.
Right. And so that's being ruled out of order. And we're back to the place of no motion on the floor. And Trustee Shuttleworth then has the opportunity to propose the motion she was considering.
Correct, because she.
That's what I'd like to do.
So Trustee Shuttleworth has altered her motion to rescind, essentially to take the motion that Trustee Rocha was proposing, and she has become the mover because you were on the prevailing side.
My first choice is to have my motion how I said it originally, but I've been told that that's the same thing. So guided by what you've told me, I would much prefer to say it like this, to ask to amend a motion previously.
Right.
But
so,
you're telling me that I can't, so then I will rescind.
So through the chair, you can, a member can word a motion however they please, but the same effect will be, that's essentially what I was saying, that the effect will be the same, whether you use the word rescind or you say you amend the motion to take it back. The essential effect will be the same.
But if you amend a motion to take it back, then it's contrary to that motion. I'd like to. And you can't make a motion that's contrary to a motion that's already been passed. The only motion you can make is to rescind. And then you can bring forward another motion if you so wish.
All right. So then.
Yes, you can.
It's not contrary.
Point of order. When that motion was presented to the board on March 6th, we were led to believe one thing. New information has surfaced, which should lead the board to understand that we voted on wrong information. We voted on information that is contrary to our policies and to a commitment in the multi-year plan. So based on us voting, what's the word I'm looking for? Voting with false information. because new information has come to light over the last month. Based on that and the breaking of our policies, it should be a no-brainer. That motion should be rescinded. And it could go back to the staff to rewrite a new report.
You are speaking out of turn at this point. We have a motion brought forward to rescind the motion. I need a seconder who was in favor of the original motion to second. Trustee Bryden, we now have a motion to rescind on the floor. Trustee Shuttleworth, would you like to speak to your motion to rescind? And I'm assuming that all of the new speakers on the list want to speak to rescinding. If you don't want to speak to rescinding, please remove your name.
Okay, so thank you, through you, Chair. So again, in efforts to rescind, I am looking at doing that in order to bring the contradictory motion, which forward. So I'd like to, again, what my wish or my hopes from this is that we are not abandoning the conversation. We're not just letting it go, but we are ensuring that we are having that proper consultation to ensure that the decision we are making is founded on a good foundation of knowledge. So although it sounds quite harsh that we're rescinding, it's actually to rescind to bring forward a motion that includes the idea of consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Zhang.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to everyone to have a chance to review our GP, the school naming GP. So in the naming GP, section 6, request to initiate the review of a school name. So in this GP, it says very clearly, so when a community member to request renaming a school, it must address two things. These two things should be included in the report. The first condition is to address if the school name is naming follow after a person's name, so it is not applicable in our case. The second condition is we need to include the school naming, if the school naming has any issues in the original naming process, has issues in the consultation, recognition, so those things. If we have those issues, it should be included in the report. And this report will be presented to the board. So we will discuss based on the board, and at the same time, the director should provide an estimate of the renaming costs at that time. Then if we approve that report, then we can start the process of establish a committee. But we missed a very important step at the very beginning. So there's no report about what is the issue in the school. So because we didn't do any the proper consultation, and there's no such a report attached to the original report. So those consultation reports are not there, and we just have a result. This say the name is harmful, but actually there's nothing can justify the result. That's why the original report, I can say, does not follow our own GP, so it's not
Okay,
valid.
so when I read the GP, it says the director will forward all such requests and accompanying rationale to the board. That happened on March the 6th. And where it appears that the request meets either of the above criteria, the director shall include an estimate of the cost of renaming the school.
Yes, consultation is before that, not after that. So this is also, we are starting the consultation.
The word consultation is not there. It is not there.
Yeah, consultation is not there.
The word consultation is not in the GP. And so we keep coming back to the word that's not in the procedure. And that's what the problem is, and that's what we need to fix going forward.
The second point was not addressed in the report, actually.
Okay, next speaker is Trustee Baxter.
Thank you. Through the chair. It was stated by staff on March 6th that trustees were not to discuss the meaning of the school name, nor staff's conclusion that the name was derogatory, in spite of an absence of information in the report to explain how that conclusion was reached. We were told that harm was done and was increasing daily, and so no other option was really in front of us other than to authorize removal of the school name. In contradiction of what was said prior to voting, all communication following the meeting stated that renaming, not an exploration of the need for renaming, was circulated in community. Failure to consult appropriately and take the time needed to do so is antithetical to our multi-year plan and our values as a board. Although I supported the motion on March 6th, given the information received since from staff via public statements and from our community through the media, I support now taking a pause on this initiative to allow for true consultation and work toward buy-in from our community. Not only because it fits my personal values and commitment to reconciliation, but to ensure we are in compliance with our statutory duty to uphold public confidence. I'm looking this evening to our chair and our parliamentarian for guidance on the best way to do so. If rescinding the motion is the best way, then I am in support of that. If amending a motion previously adopted is a better option, I would look to our chair and parliamentarian for guidance on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Baxter. So we could amend the motion, but we can't amend it to be contradictory to its current nature. It would still be that we are proceeding with a process that's in our APs and our GPs, but it would be adding the layer of consultation, which is currently not named in our procedure. And that is where we have the gap. So we do have a motion on the floor to rescind. If the person making the motion to rescind would prefer, instead of rescinding, to reword the amendment such that it just adds the piece about consultation, that may be done. But I am at the will of the trustees. I'm not the maker of the motion or the seconder of the motion, and I can only do with what is on the table, right? Trustee Bryden.
May I amend the motion on the floor to rescind and add and replace with the motion as circulated by Trustee Shuttleworth?
You may.
I would move that amendment.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'm going to ask everyone to please look at your inbox so that everyone can see.
Sorry, through you, Chair, can I just, as you're looking at your inbox, I'm going to adjust that slightly just to make it a little bit broader in terms of consultation. So I'll send it again. So we'll look at the most recent thing that I'm sending, please.
Manager Khan, is it possible for you to get the motion on the screen so that everyone, including the people in the gallery, can see the wording? No, on the screen. Yeah, thank you. It's only fair for everyone to be able to see what's happening here.
So there, Carolina.
Trustee Shuttleworth, have you sent the updated version?
So all of our strength is got to strike out.
Okay. It didn't come into my inbox.
There now. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to read it out loud so that everyone has it in front of them as well as auditorily, as we all learn and process differently. Be it resolved that the HDSB consult with our Indigenous community partners to determine whether or not it is necessary to initiate the renaming process for the secondary school at 1123 Glen Ashton Drive, Oakville, in accordance with the board's naming and renaming schools, policy, and governance procedure. And that has been moved that amendment has been moved by trustee Bryden and seconded by trustee Shuttleworth. So at this point, we would be voting on the amendment to the motion to rescind. Are we all clear on what we're voting on? Okay, we are voting on whether or not to amend the motion to rescind with replacing with this new motion that has just been brought forward by trustee Shuttleworth. If anyone is not clear, please raise your hand right now. Okay. I'm going to go down to the next speaker on the list, which is trustee Rocha, because she did have her hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, before this moves any further along, has anything been done on the previous motion? Because if the previous motion, don't shake your head, I need the clarification from staff. I need the clarification that nothing has been done on the original motion, because if things have already started, we can't rescind it. It's already in place, right? So I need that clarification before we can move forward.
Okay, through the chair, we've begun some consultation processes. Superintendent Petco can speak to the extent of that.
Through you, Chair Collard, to Trustee Amos. Yes, so as mentioned, consultation is currently happening. So we did reach out and requested, and we didn't ask pointed questions. It was open feedback, any input, any feedback. Emails were sent for that feedback to Indigenous identifying students, parents, students at secondary students, parents and community members, and Indigenous identifying staff. And all input needed to come as anonymous to ensure that every voice could be heard and that there was safety in that response. Because what we have always known, regardless of whether it's Indigenous identifying or if it's another identity group, is that many of our most vulnerable, when there are loud voices in spaces, louder voices in spaces, who have the ability, platform, or wherewithal to speak their own opinions, other voices often get overshadowed. And that's why we ensured that we did it in this manner. We also have reached out and to both Chief Sherry Lynn Hill of the Six Nations. I've also reached out to Chief Claire Salt, who is the chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would like to also reiterate, which I've shared before, that Halton District School Board is situated on the ancestral treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is why we as a board have partnership with treaty holders that are situated with the Mississaugas of the Credit. That's why we have that partnership, that it has been long-standing. And we've elevated that. We have respected that. We are in good relationship with our new chief, Claire Salt. And we have, consulted with them. And I have actually gone to a council meeting just yesterday and, spoke directly with Chief Salt and spoke directly with the council as well, chief and council. And Chair Collard, I'm wondering if you could please ask the audience to keep their comments down. It's very difficult for me to respond with the noises.
Yeah, we do have rules of decorum, and one of those rules is that the gallery must remain quiet because depending on where people are sitting around this room, they can hear better or worse depending on the noise that comes from the gallery. So please do keep the words down. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Collard. So that consultation has begun. I know that trustees, you have asked what has been done. That is what we are currently doing. We also want to let you know that it's not just our treaty partner. And just so you know, in having that conversation with Chief Salt, our consultant who we work with, Nancy Rowe, has been confirmed to be elevated and has been stood up by council and chief to continue as she has been for 13 years as our consultant. And so those conversations are being had, and they're continuing. Please keep in mind that the consultation with our treaty partner is not the definitive answer to why we have activated this AP. Our treaty partner is one of many that we've consulted. And in the end, I want to reiterate here in this space that the AP was decided by the Board of Trustees to be activated so that we may begin all of these processes. And I promise you, as a board, we absolutely value all input, perspectives, but we will also not tolerate one voice or one loud voice overshadowing other voices. And we have many, Trustee Collard, Chair Collard, we have many Indigenous communities that we serve in our schools. Many, multiple nations, multiple backgrounds. We also have intersectionality of multiple First Nations. And so we serve all, and we absolutely will listen to input, feedback, and we will absolutely ensure that feedback is taken into account. And it may not satisfy every individual who is served in our school communities in Halton. The timelines may not satisfy everyone. The ways and methods in which we might proceed may not satisfy everyone. But let me reassure you, we are consulting. And I'm deeply sorry to any trustee or any community member who feels that it's not fast enough, is not in the way you would like. But please remember that we are trying to serve multiple communities. And so I end with that, which is when there are multiple perspectives, our challenge is that we absolutely respect and we absolutely listen to, and we absolutely give that time. But please also understand that decisions need to be made. And sometimes those decisions may not be to one's perfect liking. And I apologize for that. But as the Superintendent of Indigenous Rights and Education and Inclusive Education, Human Rights, that is often the challenge that we have. But we will ensure that we are aligned with the Articles of UNDRIP, that we are aligned with our Halton District School Board Indigenous Education Policy, with our Human Rights Code, with our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We will ensure that alignment is there. And that I will personally guarantee.
So may I follow up?
Please do.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Petco. I appreciate the clarification. So as my understanding under Robert's rules, if a motion is already in motion, in action, then you cannot rescind it because it is already in motion. So from what I just heard, the first steps have already been taken on this motion. So while I'm not against the proposed motion, to me it sounds a lot like what is already happening. And so I believe we cannot rescind what is in place.
I'm going to ask our parliamentarian to please speak to that.
Sorry, point of order. When, through the chair, when Trustee Amos asked whether the process had begun, yes and no. If you look at the AP, the very first step is to establish a committee. That committee has not been established. Yes, consultation may have started, but that's not even a step. It's not a step, and we've acknowledged that that's a huge gap in our AP. So Trustee Amos, depends on how you want to interpret it. So if you want to interpret what's in writing, no. The first step has not been done. And that first step, according to our IP, was to create a committee. That committee has not been established, and I can vouch for that because I would be on it and I would have known about it.
Okay, so we still have a really lengthy speakers list, and I did ask the parliamentarian for her opinion on this ruling.
Through you, Chair Collard. Yes, that is correct. That is a rule in Robert's rules that if a motion has been adopted and work that can't be undone has begun, then yes, absolutely, you can't move to rescind that motion. From what I'm hearing, it sounds as though there is debate as to whether or not it passes that threshold. So really, that's as much as I can offer in that regard.
Thank you. I would say that what's happened to this point in time has been relationship building and not action on the motion. So I do take your observation very seriously, but yeah, I think the motion is fine. We still have a number of people to go through on the speakers list, so let's get Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much, Chair Collard. And I appreciated the way you laid out the motion, because my understanding is the motion we have right now is in two parts, one to rescind and the other to consult with the Indigenous community. And if I'm understanding correctly, the process that we have in place currently would be consulting with that community. So I'm up around the motion to rescind part of the motion, and I've been listening very actively to everything that's been said. But one of the things that I remember hearing at the beginning March meeting was about damage being done. And that was one of the rationales for changing, beginning the procedure to look at changing the name, which is what, as I understand it, is happening. And I was wondering, Chair Collard, through you possibly to Associate Director Salmini or whichever staff person she deems would be the most appropriate, I'd like to go back and revisit that harmful piece that we had talked about. And then I also had a second question. We've talked about consultation and everything else. And my other question would be, has our Indigenous Advisory Council had involvement in this? And if I can get clarification on those two pieces, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm going to pass that over to Superintendent Petco.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Collard. Absolutely. We have consulted with our Indigenous Education Advisory Council, and now referred to as Indigenous Education Council, and they have also provided input as well.
Did you have any follow-up to that, Trustee Daniele?
I was just, again, going back to the piece about damage and harm being done. Should we rescind this? Are we compiling on that? Are we negating that? I would very much like to hear from staff on that, please.
So just to make sure that Associate Director Salmini is clear, the question is, will we perpetrate additional harm by passing the suggested motion that's in front of us now?
Yes, you said it much better and clearer than I did.
Thank you. Associate Director Salmini.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, as Superintendent Petco has already stated, we probably have mixed views, opinions, and so could some people see this as additional harm? Absolutely, right? And others will not. So I think that's the best way I can answer it, unless Superintendent Petco has anything further to add.
Thank you. Now I will go to Trustee Rocha, then Trustees Baxter and Zhang.
Through the chair, so point of clarification. It was mentioned that our Indigenous Advisory Council was consulted. Can you tell me when they were consulted? Were they consulted prior to March 6th or after March 6th?
They were consulted after, but remember, like we said, if I can reiterate, through you,
it's
Chair
okay. I
Collins.
just wanted clarification. It
Absolutely.
was done after the fact.
It was after.
Okay.
But remember, too, that it was just around the activation of the AP. It wasn't about,
Right.
And now we're doing the consultation with fulsome responses, right?
Okay. So to that point, I hear that the AP was activated, but the AP, if it was activated, we're saying consultation started after because it was activated, but nowhere does it say there's consultation. So we kind of made a step after the fact. So it goes to show there's something wrong with our AP. The consultation and that information should have been provided to trustees on March 6th. Because that would be in keeping with our existing policies, our multi-year plan. So it goes back to, I appreciate that consultation is happening now, but please don't say it was activated by our voting, because it wasn't, because it's not a step. It's not a step. And I want the trustees around the table to understand our responsibilities to our policies, because policy is within our purview. And when our policies are not being followed, we need to call it out and we need to do better. So that's where I'm trying to get at, is this whole process needs to be relooked at, and let's not try to make decisions based on something that's not in writing, whereas consultation is in writing in our policies. It should have happened prior to March 6th.
Okay, moving on to Trustee Baxter and then Zhang.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would like to reiterate my previous statement that a pause is needed. I believe this motion provides for that in an intentional and conciliatory way. Also, just a quick thank you to Superintendent Petco for mentioning the invitation that went out to our families who do identify as Indigenous. Trustees did hear from one of those families expressing concern that the format given to them to provide input is not confidential, as it is required to be done via email to a generic contact@hdsb.ca email account. And so I think that's highlighted yet another way, as Trustee Rocha has highlighted, that we do have some serious issues in our policies and processes that we should be identifying and remedying. But for now, for this evening, I think that the least we can do is try to remedy the issue that's on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Baxter. And Trustee Zhang, you will be the last speaker.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to say three things. One is the consultation. So the consultation in the original renaming report says already consult with the treaty partner. So did we complete that process or not complete the process? So it is still very vague information for us. That's the first thing. And so we need to follow all our procedure. But if the process is not clear, so it's a question. It's a big question. The second one is I want to say about the consulting with the treaty partner. So this is, we recognize we are on the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation land. So we recognize that, we respect all the indigenous rights. But we are not talking about discussing a topic about the land. We are talking about the words, Iroquois. Is the Iroquois harmful or not? So for this language, any language matter, this is about the culture and about the history. We need to ask the Haudenosaunee community, so they know their language, they know their history better than anybody else. So this is a big gap. We see that in the entire process. We didn't do that, and that one we must consider. So we need to make up this. And the third one, I would like to all the trustees and the board members to know our responsibility. In Education Act 169.1.5 A and C. So all our members, the board members, we spend money because there's a $250K associated with the cost. And we must spend the money in a manner that uphold effectiveness and public confidence. So we spend the money, so public must trust us to spend the money smartly. Otherwise, it's just a public relation question. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I'm going to make a couple of comments now. I believe we have a commitment to make sure that the consultation happens. And I also believe that having it in writing in the motion is important. And so I am going to support this motion. And I am hopeful that this is a good step forward for all of us who are treaty people, and all of us in this room are treaty people. We don't want anyone to feel marginalized. We don't want anyone to feel unheard. And we don't want anyone to be hurt, whether it's by changing the name or by not changing the name. And the best way forward for us is through communication and consultation. And so I will be voting in favor of this motion. I see no other speakers on the list, so I am going to call the vote.
Point of order. Chair Collard, would you mind reading out the motion again?
The motion will be to rescind the current motion and to replace it with, be it resolved that the HDSB consult with our Indigenous community partners to determine whether or not it is necessary to initiate the renaming process for the secondary school at 1123 Glen Ashton Drive, Oakville, in accordance with the board's naming and renaming schools policy and governance procedure. Moved by Trustee Bryden, seconded by Trustee Shuttleworth.
Point of order.
Yes?
May I ask for a definition of our Indigenous community partners? Because it seems to me that's what got us here in the first place, is that there is not agreement on who the Indigenous partners are. So I'm afraid I need some clarification on that before I can vote.
I'm wondering if we would be amenable to removing the word partners and just say consult with our Indigenous community. Is that amenable to the mover and the seconder?
I'm certainly happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, so we will remove the word partners. Is that amenable to you, Trustee Daniele?
I still find that to be nebulous and vague, and I have a feeling however we go forward, someone will say, well, you didn't consult with me, so this is null and void. That's my concern with this particular wording. I don't have anything to make it better, though. I do apologize for that, but I do think leaving it as vague and nebulous as it is going to end us up exactly where we are right now.
I think if we cast the net wide, and very publicly and very transparently, we will capture the voices of the people who are impacted by this name. And I believe that we have the will to do this in this room, as well as the will of the people in the gallery to ensure that the public is made aware. And so, please cast your votes. You may ask one more question.
Thank you. Just want to clarify. So this motion is not actually dependent on the outcome of it, will not actually activate a school naming process. It's only a consultation. It will have to come back to the board to actually restart a school naming process. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. And in that intervening time, perhaps the AP and the GP can be amended. Okay, so the motion is up.
Point of order, Chair Collard?
Yes?
I wonder if I could just contribute to the very valid point that Trustee Daniele made. I'm concerned that if we simply include the word Indigenous community in our motion, we are using a singular term that's inappropriate. So perhaps replacing Indigenous community partners to be members, Indigenous members of the Halton community would be more appropriate.
How about Indigenous communities? Okay, everyone else in the room seems to think community is fine. So we'll not be changing that word, and we can actually vote, right? Okay.
Point of.
This is the last one.
No, a point of, no, just a please. Could we, I don't know what the motion for that is. Can you post it on the board so I know what we're looking at? Thank you.
You may cast your votes.
I can't get it. It's the email from
Everyone did get the email from Trustee Shuttleworth.
It's on your blue screen.
Yep.
Chair, I'm in favor, but I cannot log into Crestron for some reason.
Okay, thank you. Still waiting on a few people to vote. One remaining vote.
Chair Collett, I've clicked yes on Crestron. I'm not sure it's registering.
Okay, what was your vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute recess at this time.